is the first of 3 such forums that we wanted to put together. And we actually had a sense, if I were guessing, I thought maybe about 50 people. And that's probably, maybe we'll get to 50, or maybe we're right about there now. So this is a number that doesn't surprise. I think that we may actually pick up a few more members as we go along through the month of July. So we appreciate your being here with us for the first time to run through this and to learn with you. By the way, if you don't know, I'm Pastor Jeff Hosmer, and I'm really glad to be here with you. And just a couple of words, and I want to introduce Dick Young to share some things after a word of prayer. Very early in my conversations about coming to North Lake, more than 3 years ago, I was asked about thinking strategically regarding the future of North Lake and looking at more of the big picture questions for the church. And that's one of the things that I've had some experience doing previously, and I said I would engage that when it felt right to be able to start doing that. I didn't feel like I could tackle that at all in the first several years of being here, which are much more about building relationships and getting to know one another and trying to understand the mission context in which North Lake lives and breathes and has its being for God. But then after a couple of years, I did say to the session, I think it's time for us to put a group like that together. And that was the genesis then for the Body Builders team. And in case you haven't seen the full report, and it is available, if anybody wants a print copy, you'd have to ask in the office, but it's available online. You can go to the website, and there's a little box at the bottom left, or you can check at the top one, and it give you can go into and get the full report there if you'd like to read it. But one of the things we said, and the reason for the name of the team, because none of us, I'm actually in worse shape now than I was when I started this team. It hasn't helped my body at all. But the derivation of it is right out of Ephesians chapter 4, and it says, here Paul writes, "But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by every ligament with which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body's growth in building itself up in love." Now that's a great text, and there's a lot there. There's probably 15 sermons there that I can come up with right off the hand. But the point is, we wanted to look at what does it mean for North Lake to be growing up as the body of Christ here in this community. What's happened, and because this church is unusual, in case you didn't know it. All right, there aren't many Presbyterian churches that have flourished and grown over the last 25 years. And North Lake is one of them. North Lake is unique. It's the largest in our presbytery, but it's also, we have our own unique history, and there are reasons for that. And so you really have to kind of look at and understand what's our context and the questions that go around that, and how do we look forward as the body of Christ at North Lake. So that's what brought together our team, and I was really thrilled to be a part of such a great group. We are hoping today to spend about an hour and a half here. If it goes longer than that, it's not my choice. But I will say to you that if there are those of you who have questions and want to spend more time, I think we'll do that. Or you can write to me or call or let the committee know if there's more depth you want to go into. What I anticipate is that Dick will share, he's got a PowerPoint presentation which summarizes the contents of the 37-page report. He summarizes it, and Dick will cover that verbally. And then what we're going to do is Dottie Wise, who's also an elder and on the team, she's going to speak a little bit about the property issues. And on the way in, you may have picked up a copy of the brochure that was given to anybody who was on the target property at the open house a couple Sundays ago. So if you did, do you need one? Oh, you got one. Okay. How many of you were there at the open house? Just a show of hands. How many of you were at the open house? Well, that's good. Okay, that gives us some idea, about half of you maybe. And so you hopefully picked this up on the way in. And we're going to ask that all questions would wait until after about 20 to 30 minutes of presenting. And that after that, I'm going to facilitate those questions, and we'll do our best to answer what we're able to answer, and know that there'll be some questions you'll want to address that we just won't be able to answer yet. But we'll do our best. Okay? Let's pray. Jesus, you are the head of the body, and we thank you for that. I thank you so much that you're Lord of the church and I'm not. And I thank you for this part of your body, Jesus, the muscles and the tendons and the sinews of North Lake Presbyterian Church, and for the way that it has grown and flourished through 26 years. Thank you for those who had a vision for this church, who were seeing a building on this campus before there was anything here. And we thank you also that we continue to have robust ministry and mission in your name and impact in the community. We thank you that there are so many here, Lord, who want to follow you, to be your disciples. And we pray that will continue to be true. As we're here, just come and be with us, speak to us, guide us. As we listen to each other, help us to listen and hear you. We ask this humbly, but also with great hope and expectation. We pray in your holy name. Amen. Amen. So Dick Young is Elder Young. I love that name. We have Elder
My wife
Young.
says I'm an elder.
Elder Young and Elder Wise are the two who are here. Yeah. So, Dick.
All right. You know, I was thinking today as Cindy was getting my mic on and getting me ready for this presentation, when I started giving presentations many years ago, anybody use an overhead projector with the transparency? And wow, where have we came, right? So today I want to bring you up to speed where we began and how did we get to where we are today. So on October the 27th, the session approved the formation of our team. And our charge was to prepare a comprehensive strategy plan to build up the body of Christ. Team members were selected and approved by the session. And Pastor Jeff, Worship Director Mike Snow, Dottie Wise, and myself were elders. And we had retired Pastor Bob Collins, probably most of you know Bob, and Sue Kirkpatrick, who's gone back north for the summer. So that was our team. We started meeting in December of 2017, and we met at least weekly for 6 months. And that's probably a misnomer now because we're still meeting. So we're still continuing to meet to fulfill our job. We had a clear mandate from the session. But before I became on the session, there was a clear mandate that said we're going to fulfill the Great Commission. Okay, and we're going to make disciples. So that was in the mandate in 2016, wasn't it? Yes, 2016. So the BBT, as a team, we endorsed that core purpose. And so we do believe that disciple making is our core purpose. And everything we do then should align with that objective. So, we at Northlake have many established and developing strengths which we can build on. We found that out in a survey. I think did most of you fill out a survey? Hopefully. Okay, we had a lot of good data come from that survey. So because of their strategic importance, we want to highlight 5 of those. Worship and music, congregational care, community impact, talk about our current facilities, and leadership. Okay, so the worship message. As you know, for those who are like me, kind of math-oriented, you can see it doesn't add up to 100%. But that's because you had 2 questions. You could do 2 answers. But 75% of you said that the number one reason that you were attending was because of the worship messages. I have to agree with that. I think our worship messages are right out of the Bible and spot on. Worship music, I think whether you're in the whether you're in traditional or contemporary. Isn't our music great here? So another reason that people were continued to attend our church. Order and the style of worship was at 33%. Everything else was way lower than that. So we recommend we need to find ways to build on our strengths. So let's talk about congregational care. Over the past several years, I think especially since Pastor Jeff's gotten here, we've focused a lot more on congregational care. We have Pastor Lynn now and Pastor Jerry who are helping with that. And we have Stephen ministers. We have 9 deacons now. But we did find we might need a small chapel. It seems that sometimes when we use our big sanctuary for services other than church services, for funeral service, for example, that people kind of get lost in the enormity of it. So it would be nice to have a small chapel. Community impact. Think about this. 20 years we've had Operation Homebound, Little Blessings Child Care, and the Christian Food Pantry. 20 years our church has been the sole supporter. That's been our main missions. We've served over 750,000 meals that we've prepared and served. On average now, we're doing 200 plus meals a day. Almost 2,000 children have progressed through Little Blessings. Think about that. We're affecting the lives of 2,000 kids that may not have heard about Jesus prior to coming to our daycare. I can say that I have 6 grandkids, and every one of them went to some kind of Christian daycare or preschool, and that was a blessing. And I see that today as they've grown up. And last but not least, we've already this year, as of the last report, over 80,000 pounds of food has been donated and distributed in 2018 through the Christian Food Pantry at about 400 households. So that's pretty great, isn't it? So, okay, and as a team, we wanted to express gratitude, and Jeff mentioned that in his prayer earlier, that for our current facilities and efforts of our predecessors. Isn't this room something? I mean, when I joined the church in 2010, this room wasn't here. And I joined right before we had to vote. And, wow, what a blessing this has been. So having said that, have had 3 major construction projects over time. But the most current one was this facility here, the entrance out there, and the new kitchen in the back. So it really helped. And the memorial garden. We talked about this memorial garden, and I think we're having some meetings out there, or what am I trying to say? Where we're going to showcase it. Maybe that's the right term we want to use, okay? It's kind of a best-kept secret. We have a great place out there for a memorial garden. So everybody should look at that. I mean, one time when I did the 25th anniversary time capsule, one of the places we thought about keeping was in the memorial garden. I said, "Where's the memorial garden?" And John Bros took me on a little walk, and wow, that's pretty neat. So we have that out there. And then, having said that, there are some improvements we need to make in our current facility. And as Jeff said earlier, God has bestowed visionary leadership on this church. Think about it back. Gary Lester was the first pastor. He led us. Then Pastor Denny came. I don't know. I wasn't here. Was the sanctuary built under Gary Lester, or was it built under Gary? And then Denny came and kept things going, and now Jeff's here. We've had some great leadership in this church, and you can see from all of our membership and that we have been really blessed. So our church was founded 25 years ago, and again, we had Operation Homebound, Little Blessings, and the Christian Food Pantry have been going on for 20 years now. So today we are making disciples of Christ because of what the leaders years ago put into place. So we believe it's season now for our leadership to look for a vision of the future. So we did this survey, plus we talked to a lot of people, and what do you think the number one issue is? Parking. Yep. We're landlocked here. So we have a lot of congestion between the 9:45 and the 11:15. There's probably some 11:15 people here that would understand that. And one of the things we see is the 8:15 service. When it's out, I think those people are hungry and they're headed to breakfast. And so they go out. But the 9:45 service, they like the social. They're the social group. So they stay out here, which is fun, and we would encourage that. But what's it do to the parking lot? They don't leave, and nobody can come in. So you can kind of see we got some difficulties there. We only have 395 spaces on site. And we have a couple hundred across the street that condo association lets us use. So we also heard through our surveys and comments from folks that some people want to come to church. They get here and can't find a parking spot. They just leave. So that's a bad thing. So again, as a team, we didn't believe there was any single measure. There would be a nice single measure if there was open land somewhere around, but there's not. So given that, there's no single measure that's going to fix all these things. Now, we have discussed moving worship times from moving the first service to 8 o'clock and then the second service till 9:30. That would give us another 15 minutes between the 9:45, the current 9:45, and the 11:15. So I don't know if that would be a help, but one of the things we're looking at. We said we could implement measures to improve flow through the parking lot. Get a little congested out there sometimes, especially in the winter. We could hire the police to help direct traffic on Rolling Acres. It's nice that stoplight lets 4 cars through at a time, isn't it? Yeah. And if we relocated Little Blessings, we could get another 44 prime parking spots. So, they're right close to the church, and so we'd have 44 spots there. So then I want to talk a little bit about our missions. We've had rapid growth in the 25 years. We just kept new members, and things kept happening, and we grew, and we just did anything that basically came along in missions. But now we're saying, hey, the number of ministries and collections and classes and everything's confusing. If you take too many programs on simultaneously, you cannot do them all well. And so we're taking a look at that. We need to decide what not to do or discontinue based on discipleship. Are we making disciples? Are we affecting the right, what am I trying to say here? The right goal, I guess, is making disciples of Christ. Okay. So again, we want to be, communication was another issue we had. So we want to be clear that our core purpose is making disciples for Christ. Now we got 1,500 members, and look at the demographics across our church. We just had a vacation Bible school, so we have that age. I asked a lady that I ride bicycles with that goes to the Methodist church, and I said, do you have any vacation Bible school? No, they don't have any kids. So they don't have it. We're blessed to have vacation Bible school. But we're trying to communicate now across people that have grown up like my kids, or my grandkids for sure, with iPhones and the internet. To some of us folks that grew up with, my grandma had a phone you held up to your ear and you talked into the, so we got a widespread of people that we have to communicate with, so we know we're struggling with that some. We have external and external communications handled by an assortment of people with very minimal coordination. Okay? So, given that, we recommend that we fill a position for a communications director here at the church. We think that would be, that we should do that. It would behoove us to do that. Okay, the building. Let's get back to the building needs. So we had a lot of things on our surveys, as you can imagine, but we kind of gleaned that down to a few things, and we still need a chapel for small funerals. The choir is working in pretty cramped quarters. They have a room that they practice in, right, Mike? That's pretty small, and they don't have a lot of space for storage, and they have a lot of music to store, so they're suffering in cramped quarters. The church office space, coming out of corporate world, if I wanted a conference room, we had all kinds of conference rooms, Here there's no conference room. And to get to Mike Smith's office, you have to go through Lynn's office. And if Lynn's doing congregational care with someone that maybe had their husband or partner pass away, people going to Mike's office are just passing through. So we have some awkward situations that we need to fix. So we would recommend hiring a consulting firm to do a feasibility study and say, okay, what can we do with the campus we have right here today? What can be done? And then Sue on our team, she says, there's no hot water in the women's restroom. So there's no hot water in the women's restroom. There's probably not in the men's either, but I did not pay attention. But in Florida, do you need hot water? So I don't know. So again, our most glaring weakness is our parking, okay? Again, we seat about 1,200 right in the sanctuary. We have 395 spots on site. We got 200 spots across the street. But, you know, my wife worked for an attorney for 25 years, and I was thinking about those 200 spots. We park over there on Sunday mornings. If somebody falls, gets hurt, and happens to sue, I bet those 200 spots are gone. Just saying. Could happen. So we have no control over those 200 spots. We're grateful and blessed that we can use those spots, but they're not in our control. Okay, so again, Little Blessing represents 44 spots, right? And we believe that the current location hampers both Little Blessings and North Lake. So that building over there was designed as daycare. It's a modular building that's got a limited lifespan, and the good old state government in general tends to change the rules. So room sizes and the number of kids you can have in a room that size all changes, and so limiting our ability to do as good a job with that as we should be able to do. So if we could relocate to Little Blessings, we'd have 11% increase in parking, but would also provide a space for Little Blessings to grow. Right now, the pick-up and drop-off is kind of congested there, right, Jeff? So because the kids are coming out, we're driving by. So that's congested there. So we'd have a safer pick-up and drop-off, and they'd have some economic viability. Did I go 2? There we go. So we spent months gathering data and reflecting on the future of North Lake before we ever thought about property. But it became glaring obvious to us that parking was a huge problem. It's limiting our growth. We're probably losing people because of the parking situation. So what can we do about that? So that's when we started looking at property. So, you know, anybody comes to church on Sunday sees those big signs over there. It says, for sale, right? We said, maybe we could buy that. So we looked at that. We don't want to be in the same position 10 years from now with no parking. We got about 8 acres here, right? 8 acres here, I think is what John told me. The Methodist Church, and I'm just using them as an example because I know a lady that goes there, but they got about 12, 17, 15 acres. Mike says 15 acres compared to our 8. They're growing, and we're not because we can't park them. So anyway, we have resolved that we need to resolve that. And this prompted us to take a look beyond our campus. So one option, again, as I said, was the condos across the street. 2 were available, about $500,000, give or take. That would give us a vote in the condo association to maybe help secure the parking. And it would help, we could move offices over there. Little Blessings couldn't go there because that's kind of a reserve for offices and that sort of thing. So, but it would alleviate some of our office congestion. So, you know, that was a thought. And then all of a sudden, we found out this 8.46 acres was available out there on Griffin Road. And many of you were out there last Sunday, and hopefully you'll all get a chance to get out there. Before we have 3 opportunities to do that. But we think this is an ideal place for Little Blessings to grow. We could provide a safer pickup and drop off for the children. We could use that for overflow parking if we had to, and use our buses to shuttle people back and forth. That's one possibility. You know, I guess whatever you could think of, we could use that property for. We could think church picnics. There's a great place with a bunch of trees where you could have a shelter and you could have picnics. You could have Easter sunrise service out there. You could do recreational ministries. We could do stuff with the youth out there. So there's just, we don't know what all could be used for. So our proposal is to purchase that 8.46 acres, develop a plan to construct a new Little Blessings, and one that could be designed as a Christian preschool and start developing young disciples of Christ. Because today, folks, a lot of those kids aren't getting it at home. If they don't hear it at some place like this, they may not hear it. So I know I was blessed to go to Sunday school when I was growing up, and I know my grandkids all went to Christian preschool. So been a blessing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dottie for the property.
I believe this is on. Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My goal is not to be elder-wise, but be the wise elder. I'm still working on it. Haven't gotten that yet. But don't we have a wonderful church? We have a wonderful church. And to see the support of you all coming out to hear more and hear our plans. I know in the last 6 months, I learned so much about church organization, probably more than I ever wanted to know. I really didn't know that much about churches and how the organizations ran, but I understand it now, and it's just really showed me the depth, and it just is so amazing to me because we are in this building because people before us had the vision to move the building, to buy this land. And it was a bare piece of land to build this church and then build it again when the needs change. And, you know, we're standing on the shoulders of those visionaries who put this building in place. But any organization has to keep looking and changing and growing because what is around us keeps changing and growing. And for us to remain a viable church in our area, we need to take a look at the future and say, what is the future going to look like for this church? And that's a tough question. But, you know, I had peace the other morning because we don't know what it's going to look like. And some of us probably won't even be here. But you know what? God knows. And God knows exactly what ministries he wants this church to have. And when we were as a team and sitting and talking about it, we decided that those 3 ministries that were started 20 years ago, Little Blessings and the Food Pantry and Operation Homebound, are our major ministries of the church. When this addition was put on, the kitchen was changed dramatically. I remember that old kitchen. I don't even know how they did it. Oh, was that something? To get those meals out of there, and they labored. That was just a labor of love for so many years. And Little Blessings, and I know the Food Pantry, that was built, and we heard that story with Gary Lester, how that was built like in 24 hours. Just amazing. And so the spotlight's on that. But then we looked at Little Blessings, and I went to their graduation this year, and it was just a delight. There's nothing like little children learning about Jesus. And I know I was privileged as a little girl. My mother was the kindergarten registrar at our Presbyterian church, and I got to go in to the kindergarten from a little girl on, and I think it gave me my love of learning and just the basic principles that you just don't forget as you get older. So we've kind of recommitted to Little Blessings and saying, we want this to be a part of North Lake, and we want to make it as good as we can possibly make it. Right now, it is sitting in our parking lot, and that was a wonderful option because it did start in these classrooms over here, not exactly here, and started there, and they needed more space, so they put up the modular building, which was the right thing at the time. But right now, that modular building is right in, close to the building, where many of us who have trouble with knees or hips or whatever would love to walk and be a little closer to the building. And it is a building that has a shorter lifespan. It's a modular building. It's not going to last like this building. So something will have to be done in the future about the building. So as a team, we looked at that and said, wow, everything seems to be pointing to our parking is a major problem. I don't know about you, but sometimes in restaurants, when you have somebody handicapped and there's certain restaurants I won't go to because can't get in close enough, or there's not enough parking for handicapped people. And when you're on a walker or something like that, it's so very difficult. Even when you're not on a walker and you have a bad knee or something, it's hard. So we looked at that and said, what could Little Blessings be is there a way that we can help alleviate some of our parking? Now, it's not going to make parking perfect, but certainly with all combined with the other things of maybe changing the times of our services, etc., it could make a difference. But we don't want to give up little blessings. In fact, possibly could we make it even better? Could we have a building that would be better for them? Could we possibly label it as a Christian preschool? Could we look at the ages we're taking? Could we maybe add classes? Could we possibly put something onto that building that would help serve the community around us? And you all haven't been short on ideas. So we said, well, where could we do this? And Pastor Jeff just happened to be driving by a piece of land and said, that looks interesting. And you know, there were cows on the property. I love cows. And it was on Griffin Road there. So for you all who have not been to the property, that little brochure that we gave you kind of has an outline, 2 different ways of the property. There's basically 2 entrances in and out. If you just go out sort of the back part of the church here onto Griffin Avenue, make your right, go through the light on Route CR 25, or that's also called Teague Trail there, go right across it until there's a farm gate there. Just not much beyond it. There's a little house across the street from it, and you go in there. That's one entrance, and that's the more narrow part of the land. It's all fenced in, and there's a fencing. It's not the corner part of it. There's a house, a couple houses there. There's a little beauty parlor, etc. It's not that. It's like somebody took a corner out of the rectangle. But there is that entrance off of Griffin Road, and it goes, it's all the cleared land back to the trees. And then if you're looking at it, if you're on Route 25, so if you go from our church and at the light, you make your right onto 25, it's right past the beauty of the little building there. There's sort of water wizards, and then there's all the storage of RVs. That's all part of this property. And actually, there's quite a bit of frontage on Route 25, and it goes all the way to the woods. And then you're going to see there's another piece of property for sale over there that's for sale by owner, 6 acres. And they're even listing that for more per acre than this was listed at. Now, why did the church go ahead and sort of put a contract on this? Why would we do that without a congregational meeting? Well, what happened is we were looking at the land, and there was a lot of interest in the land. Another church was looking. Other parties were looking at it. And we thought, wow, this is something, if God's leading this to us, if leading us to this land, then maybe we should tie it up for now and then see what the congregation wants to do. And it's always up to the congregation. This is not the team's decision. This is not Pastor Jeff's decision. It's a congregational decision. If you choose not to buy the land, God doesn't want us to buy the land. It's that simple. But we tied it up. But then we put contingencies in the contract. And you all know what contingencies mean because you've all bought homes. It means like when you have a mortgage, if you don't get your mortgage, guess what? You don't get the house, and your money comes back to you because you've tied it up with a contingency. Well, we did that on the land. We said, wait a minute, our most important contingency is our August 7th meeting. And the congregation has to approve it. If the congregation does not want this land, does not see this as the future, then we get our deposit back and we do not buy the land. The other major contingency we put on there is it has to appraise for what we paid. Now the land purchase, the asking price on the land was $950,000 for 8.46 acres. There's actually 4 lots there. That's the combined price. The 4 lots have really crazy zoning. Apparently Lake County had some real interesting zoning way back. And one of the lots is commercial in the front, residential in the back. They don't do that anymore. The one with the cows, that was residential. That makes no sense. The owner wanted to kind of sell it together, which I think was a wise move. But if the land does not appraise for the agreed on purchase price, then the deal is off and it would have to be renegotiated. So that's another contingency built in on that. The purchase price that we agreed to, in real estate, we don't give that price out until we close. And the reason for that is you've probably all been there, because if you've been selling your house and somebody comes along and says, oh, I want to buy your house for $199,500 and you were asking $220 or something like that, and the deal falls through because of a mortgage or something else, then the next person would come along and say, well, wait a minute. The neighbor would say, oh, I know you can get that house cheaper because the last person offered this. And so that's why the price isn't mentioned, because in case we decide not to get the land, that's only fair to the seller, that they would again put it on the market for whatever asking price they want, with no one knowing what North Lake was willing to pay for the land. So what are the advantages here? The main thing that has led us to this is, of course, little blessings. Just like we built a new kitchen so that Operation Homebound could be just one of the major services to the community. Being able to teach these little children in their earliest time is so very important. And the committee looked at that and said, do we want this to continue? If so, we need to give them a facility that they can continue in. And that's why the land. The other thing, we were looking at security. We like the fact that possibly you could go in on Griffin and make that one way and go out on Route 25. The property is fenced and it could be more secure. A building like that would be certainly more secure, a regular building, and hurricanes and things like that, safer for the children. Also, people have suggested, many things. In fact, someone who came by, you might even be in the audience now, suggested we put a golf course. It looks like a lot of land right now, but when you put a building and you put some parking on there, but the golf course, I love that. Someone else wanted a retreat. That would be fun too. But we're thinking, we have no green space here. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to have a church picnic? A little pavilion out there, maybe some little bathrooms there and picnic tables, we could go there. Maybe a soccer field for our young people, or maybe our older people. Maybe something attached to Little Blessings, or like a gymnasium type thing that they could use when they're there, but also we could invite the community in and bring the community in that way and get to know us a little bit. Overflow parking is a big thing. Christmas and Easter continue to be days that people traditionally like to come to church who don't come other times. And we really are crowded, and the parking is a big problem then. So overflow parking, we have 2 buses. We could use them, shuttle people back and forth there. How about an Easter sunrise service? Can't you see it out there? The land is beautiful. If you haven't been there, it's very open, and it makes it so easy to see with a scattering of trees, just enough. There are also fire ants, I found out, but we won't talk about them. Yes, it's quite nice. But really, what we'd most like you to do is pray that we are going to do exactly what God wants us to do in the future with North Lake Church. And buying that land is going to be a major commitment, because we do have to get the zoning changed. As I said, there's all kinds of zoning out there. So we have to go to the city of Lady Lake, and it has to be annexed to the city of Lady Lake, because that would bring in the water and the sewers. And then we would also have to change the zoning to school and religious activities. We have spoken with the growth manager in Lady Lake, and he's been very nice, very encouraging, and explained to us what steps. They meet once a month or twice a month. It's a long, long process to get anything from bare land to where you need to go with it. And you need to draw up some plans so that they can say, well, what are you planning to do with the land? They don't want a lot of surprises. So you at least have to have a starting point. And then when we begin to build, of course, it has to get much more specific. But we're in the very initial phases, and this is one piece of this whole plan that Dick talked about. That does not mean our church here is not going to need a few things like the offices and the choir room and perhaps a little chapel, but it really does, it means that we all have to look at it and say, is this what we want for North Lake? What are our concerns? Do we think this is a good idea? Do we see this as the future of North Lake? Are we willing to back it and support it? Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Awesome. I appreciate so much both Dottie and Dick doing a fabulous job presenting quite a bit of information. And I've had, I think, 15 to 20 people who've told me that they have accessed and read the report in its entirety. And I appreciate that. We weren't expecting that you'd all have done your homework and read everything. That's why we wanted to give a summation of what's there for those who are not familiar with it. But again, it's there. On page 7, at the end of the introduction, it says, the BBT recognizes the looming challenges inherent in this report to the session. Because remember, we were charged by the session and we reported to the session, our governing body of elders. And we actually gave them a preview. We had a half-day retreat on May 3rd. And it occurred to me, it's like, that's 2 months ago now, where we actually sat down and spent a half day with our elders talking about what we saw going into the final report. And then the session had 2 more occasions to see it in a bit more depth on May 15th. And May 29th, the final report was given, and session received that report, approved the report and received it, and began to look at some of the actions there. And so this is a part of that process. And we said, we recognize the looming challenges inherent in this report to the session. The team also sees tremendous opportunities for a vigorous future of making disciples for Jesus Christ. The recommendations are bold and far-reaching, intended to make a substantive difference for the next 25 years. This report is submitted as it has been created, with steadfast prayers that God will guide our North Lake discernment and decision-making. And this afternoon is part of that. This afternoon is a part of that process. So let me now turn it to you and see what questions, observations, and we are going to just, so that everybody can participate, so that we have a chance to
Yes.
we want
and also something I would ask, we are trying to record this to upload for people that may be seasonals and up north. So when you're talking, don't talk into your microphone like this. Please talk into it like this, so that way anybody on the recording will be able to understand very clearly what you are saying.
Great. Thanks. So we got 2 mics that'll float around. Let's start right here. And Dick.
My name is Carolyn Morris. I'm one of the Sunday school teachers. In case you don't know it, we do have a children's Sunday school. It seems, and my concern right now is, I haven't seen it any place in this report. We have had ups and downs, but right now we're growing. We're to the point where we'd like to have another class or a room just dedicated to Sunday school. I teach the 4 to 6 year olds in a room with big tables and one little table for the kids, and they do get rambunctious sometimes. But I just wondered, that whole section seems to be on hold, both the young families and the kids, and I just wondered if there was a thought on that.
Right. Carolyn, that's a great observation, and we're glad that we have an issue with Sunday school where we'd like to have an additional classroom. Whether or not we can have a dedicated space for every Sunday or it's dedicated only to Sunday school, most of our spaces here are multi-purpose. And so if we can have it better suited for the kids, we want to do that. We didn't see that as a strategic question as much as a tactical one. That is, we think we can make some improvements even in the way we're doing it right now. That's why it doesn't show up in this report. I'm glad you've raised that. And certainly it's a question we'd like to make sure we're doing our best. In the long run, if there's greater capacity beyond this campus, it could be that our focus for ministry with children and young families could be in the same location as where Little Blessings is. In other words, that could be an eastern campus where we have much more of a focus on our work with younger families. That's a question mark, but it's a possibility. In the short run, I think we can do a better job with children's classrooms even where we are. Mm-hmm. Who's next? Another one right here?
My name is Hal Moores. This is my wife Carolyn, who sings in the choir. What's the total cost of this project going to be, approximately?
Well, that's a great question. We all have that question, Hal. We all have that question. We're looking at a number of different layers to this. And in fact, part of it is we know there's a purchase of a property, but there's also development issues of raw property. And then the acquisition. One of the things we looked at was moving the modular building over there for the short term. But when you assess the cost of that, you think it's probably better. You're probably better off to go ahead and do new construction versus moving a building that already has limited life expectancy. So I'm not evading. We don't know. We think, and I also know the scripture. You want to know how much the tower will cost before you start building the tower. I know that scripture well. But right now we're in that discernment mode. We're trying to get those things from. That's why we're doing a feasibility study. We've asked an architect to come, an engineering firm, to do the building development site plan, and then give us some ballpark figures so we know what we're working with. Right now, we'd be grabbing figures without having a basis for giving an answer to that.
When will we have that?
Hopefully by August 7th, hopefully by the end of this month, we're going to have a much better basis for that. Because we've commissioned the appraisal, so that should come in, and we've asked an engineering firm to provide for us by the end of July that building site plan that would give us some more information. We also, we know the cost of construction per square foot, and so we could do some projections. We know how much it costs to build this space, and so we can do some rough estimates, but we'd like to be a little more specific than that. We're talking millions, right? We're talking several $1 million.
What's our mortgage now?
It's did everybody hear the question? The question is, what is our mortgage currently? And the current mortgage is $2.8 million, right? The current mortgage is $2.8 million, right? And so one of the things the team has talked about is we'd like to approach this with a capital campaign fund so that we are not adding to, if anything, maybe we use that as an opportunity also to address the mortgage. But at the very least, it would not have a negative impact in raising the current mortgage. The current mortgage payments cost us somewhere around $250,000 a year. That's what we're paying on our mortgage in our annual budget. And boy, wouldn't we love to have that to use for other purposes, right? We would. As somebody who came here, 3 years ago and was looking at what was there in terms of the financial, we're healthy financially, but there's some things we'd like to see better. That's one of the things I'd like to see better. Over the course of the time that I'm here as a pastor, I'd like to make sure that we have left this church in the healthiest possible condition we can leave it in, including addressing the mortgage. Yeah.
I got one more question.
Okay, just use the mic again, please, Hal.
Why do we need a full-time communication person? Director. What all?
What are the job responsibilities?
Right. So the question is, in case you didn't hear it, is why would we need a full-time director of communications? And I've got some real thoughts on that, but I'm going to ask Mike if you would address that, because
I guess my analogy would be right now we approach our communications ministry as if it would be like if we did not have designated custodial staff. Now think about that. Imagine if, like say, I was responsible for cleaning my office, which was a really bad idea. Jeff was responsible for his office. And so you would have very spotty results. You would have some people, their office would be immaculate. Others, which would be probably me, would not look so good. And then we would come in every week and go, wow, this place doesn't look very good. Well, that's kind of what we're doing with our communications right now. Okay, this person kind of takes care of a few things, this person takes care of, and so there's not really good coordination between the different modes of communication. Some people do it very well, others don't do it so well. And in this day and age, communication is very important. Which includes, which I hear a lot of you mention sometimes, is, say, newspaper ads, advertising, external communication. That's a part of that too that could probably be tightened up, especially in terms of, say, somebody who's doing those external communications, knowing all that's going on within the congregation, and also that can prioritize and say, "Ooh, okay, that item right there, we really need to really promote that because that's going to really draw people and that's going to connect with people." Just different things like that. We could do much, much better, and this church could flourish because of that even more if we did that a lot better. So things like kind of like these second mile videos that we do, things like that could be tightened up. Advertising could be tightened up. Communications within the office between departments could be tightened up. There's a lot there that could be, as with my analogy, could be cleaned up in a way that where we could have something like where we have with our facilities staff, where we look around and the place looks pretty good because they're working on seeing, okay, we got a spot over there where some tape kind of got on the floor that we're going to need to work with. We know everything is circulated around, that the office is going to be clean. We know in a few weeks when the carpets are going to be clean, and that's being communicated. Even this morning, we know that this room's going to be clean on a certain day. The offices, we don't have that in communications right now, and we really, really need it.
Carolyn Morse, and my question is on the growth of our church and the area. The Villages seems to be growing specifically south of us. And have we done any studies that will tell us what we can expect in increased membership here? And has there been that much an increase in membership, we'll say in the past 5 years even? We've been here 7 years, and I don't know that we've grown that much. We were at New Life Church for 7 years before we came here.
Right.
So I think we have to keep that very much in mind, where the area is growing, and are we going to get them? Can we attract them? And I'm all for that.
Carolyn, that's a great question about the trending in the community. Team actually talked quite a bit about that, including, we're certainly aware, anybody that lives in this area knows what edges are growing in the Villages, right? Anybody around here knows where they're building and developing. And we know that that's not moved closer to us. We also, however, know that there is a high level of turnover in the Villages, in properties. And so no matter where we are in proximity to the Villages, there's still going to be newcomers who are coming into our area, including right across the street, and properties here that are purchased. They may even tear down a home and build a new one. So I think we still felt like the harvest is good from the standpoint of the number of people. If the easy years of growing are behind us, from the standpoint of it's not explosive growth that's right in our neighborhood or vicinity, but there's still, the turnover is very high. That's one of the things that Dottie, who's a realtor, was pointing out, that the number of people who are moving into this area every year is still very, we should not be discouraged. We should not be discouraged. As to the church's growth, we've kind of been at a plateau. There hasn't been a significant amount of growth. Our worship attendance is slightly down. It's been down slightly in our traditional services and up very slightly in our contemporary service. But again, I think if you look back to 2009 and 10, which was the high water mark for church attendance. Is that right, Mike? That was the high water mark. The North Lake grew and then bumped its head right against, it couldn't grow anymore. It bumped its head against the ceiling of what it could do. I mean, Pastor Denny and others who were leading at that time, they were doing a great job. There were good things as part of what prompted the building of this space here as well. And parking contributes to that. So when the parking was taken for the Little Blessings, and even this project, I understand, took a few more spots. So the attendance was growing, but the parking capacity wasn't matching that. And so that's one of the things we've got to find a way. I was asked within months of arrival here, what are you going to do about the parking? And more than once I was asked. And so we do know of persons who have driven through and left because of the parking. We've had parking folks out there said he handed me his offering envelope and left. Didn't even come into worship because of that. So, okay. There's a hand back there. Can we go to Ron, please? Yeah.
Thank you. Is this on? Oh, yes,
there
it
you
is.
go. Yeah.
Okay, I'm speaking into it. I was on a building program at another church, and I'm sure there's people here that know the same thing but may have not thought about it. We wanted to put up a building at our church, and there was a company in Gainesville who told us how to save some money. Said, first of all, if you use us, we will do all your paperwork, we'll draw up all the plans, we'll give you a list of what needs to be bought, you pay for it, you don't have to pay tax. And he went on and on about all the different things they could do to help save. And the contractor that was in Palaca was Robert Taylor. And I don't know if he's still there or not, but he has all the things written down from the company. I mean, they wanted to put up a building for us, and they were willing to do a lot of things for us to help save money. And there's probably some builders in here that know something about this, but I'm just saying, if you don't know, we need to look.
Right. That's a great observation. We know that there are companies that will do that, as well as they're happy to run a capital campaign for you, fundraising. So there are a number of, I will say, vendors or businesses that are willing to come alongside churches to help with that. You always have to weigh out what do you want to do yourself versus what are you going to truly save money from any of these, right? But I think that's a great point. We're not in a position now. We're working with the engineering firm that actually did this current site. We're working with them because we know they've been vetted and they've already done work with Lady Lake, and they're thought of very highly. So the ones that we're working with currently through John Brose's connections and others who've been here, we're confident in their ability and their fairness. But as we look further down the road, we're going to have to weigh other options too. So.
Well, this is not what we can do.
Yeah.
If we decide we need to do it, God will supply the money.
Right.
Don't let nobody tell you you can't do it.
God will do it with our help, right?
And then we have another question here.
Okay, another question? Yeah.
Bill Allen was a wonderful music director. He left here because there was nobody listened that we needed to expand the area for the choir to practice. We still need to expand the area for the choir. And we really, right now, have a wonderful group of people that we can't take in any more people who would like to join us. So if you want to keep the choir growing, we need to have a larger space. And the team recognizes and has heard clearly the desire for more space for the choir rehearsal and storage. Those are the main things that we've heard about. That's what we tried to capture that in the report. That's in the report. Yeah.
Got a question.
Yeah. Jim? Yeah.
Have you considered, we're talking about using the space that we have on this campus. Have you considered the possibility of a parking garage? I was just in a place in Atlanta, Georgia for Holly's graduation, and that church there had a parking garage on the campus. Of course, they had a big campus, but is that also a possibility?
It is one of the things that we have talked about. We've been discouraged on that from a number of fronts, both from the standpoint of, I'll enumerate why we haven't pursued it further, but others here could maybe elaborate further. My recollection is, one, it's very, very costly. Two, you're also dealing with the issue of elevators. You've got to at least have 2 locations of elevators, and so there's a lot more maintenance that goes with that. we had worries about our own demographics and how many folks would be comfortable driving up the ramps, because some of the ramps are tight, and in order to maximize the space that's out here. I actually asked that question when I first arrived here. I'll tell you one other issue that's been raised is security, and whether or not it's, you know, you may end up having some people using that space for purposes unintended. And so those were all considerations that were discussed. I think the biggest one was, you know, was the cost factor of trying to do that, and versus putting money into new space that we can design the way we wanted to. But it's a really good question. Yeah.
Got a question right here.
But, let me just, Bill, go ahead.
Where would you park while they're building the garage?
Yeah, so that was another thing, is where do you park while they're building the garage? And by the way, that's one of the other issues we looked at, even with Little Blessings. See, we can do work on a new site while they're still here and meeting in their current location, and prepare the new site. So that's one of the other things that makes the transition easier. But yes, good.
Yeah, my name's Randy Cressley. I don't want to speak for Ed Walker, who coordinates parking help in January, February, March, and early April. But my experience in the 2 years that I've been helping him is, number one, when it comes to parking, it's about handicapped or disabled parking that's close to getting into the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And my initial question, though, is there a percentage of the population of this church that have the placard for handicap parking? That's number one. And will the new 44 spaces, if we go down and move Little Blessings down the road, will that 44 spots be enough and significant enough to help out with the parking for those that need it, with the disabled population of the church?
Randy, I think that's a great question. I don't have an answer specifically to the numbers, but I think that's a tremendous question, and one that we could ask, is how many folks are entitled to use handicap. Of course, that's a fluid number; it changes all the time. But we could get a snapshot figure of that, and try to see. We know how many handicap spots that we have, and we know that the number of people who are eligible to use them would exceed the number that we have. That's just a given. Yeah.
My name is Eileen Batari. There's a couple of things about everything that you're considering that kind of concerns me. One of them is, even if we were to buy the properties with all the different zoning, what guarantees do we have that we're actually going to get approval for the zoning that we need in order to make the facilities useful for the church? Second of all, regarding the handicap parking, you mentioned about shuttling from this other property. Why don't we just shuttle within our own property? We certainly could use a golf cart that has a certain capacity, or a couple of golf carts, and have it continually touring the parking lot to pick up people on a regular basis to get them from these outbound spaces to the church. The other thing concerning Little Blessings, I guess, well, again, with the parking, has anybody approached Home Depot about utilizing their parking lot and shuttling from that area? I think one of the easiest solutions as far as parking would be the spacing of the services. And there's a lot that could be done. We do have the socialization between the contemporary and the service prior, as well as the Sunday schools that follow the traditional service. So those people are staying later while other people are coming in. So I think by simply rescheduling the services so that it allows for an ample amount of time, even if you had to move the 11:15 to maybe 11:45, since wherever the issue happens to be, I think proper spacing is going to definitely free up a lot of parking spaces without us having to go and take on this big whatever. It just seems, the other thing is we went to the trouble and the expense to build this facility, and I don't know that we're actually using it to the maximum ability that we have to do that. I mean, this is a beautiful room. If we want to invite kids, why don't we turn this into kind of a gymnasium, indoor activity area? Also, we have all these brand new classrooms. You're talking about establishing a pre-K. Well, we certainly have classrooms available to do that, to set up a pre-K facility right here within our own facilities. So I would really have appreciated having a feasibility study done of this facility to see how we could maximize the use of this facility to go along with this presentation, so that you would have Plan A and Plan B as a presentation, so that all that time wouldn't be an effort wasted in just one direction.
Okay. Thanks, Eileen. Let me respond, because you've raised a number of good questions, some of which can be answered, I think, pretty swiftly, maybe not to your satisfaction. The zoning question is one that it's one of the contingencies. It's built into the contract. So we have to have a satisfactory response on the zoning questions before the sales contract would be consummated. So we share that concern. You've raised the issue of shuttling, and we, the report says we don't think any single response to the parking will be sufficient. So we've promoted a multi-pronged approach, and we've said to the session that shuttling people, even from our existing spots, could be done with a golf cart, with an 8 or 10 passenger golf cart to bring people around. We think that could and should be done, and that's one of the things that's on our list as well. We do believe, and I want to make sure I stay on track, I do believe somebody else might be in a better position to answer this. I don't want to pick on John because he hasn't said anything that would indicate that I can pick on him today. But Home Depot, I understood, had been approached about that some while ago. And, they do business on Sundays, and they're not really keen on relinquishing any of their parking spots. And it's not really convenient. I've looked at that option. I think that would be awkward on a Sunday. The time schedule, we definitely are recommending looking at that. I saw some faces when you said 11:45. I saw some responses to that. I'm very sensitive to what happens when because Sunday morning is a system. It's an interconnected system of many different ministries that are going on and people's own personal schedules. And so one tiny change in that system affects many people in many different ways. And so you don't embark on changes in Sunday morning without a lot of clear thought and prayer, and then a lot of communication about here's what we're trying to do. We do believe that Sunday morning schedule can alleviate some of the pinch. We don't think it's going to take care of it entirely. And I still feel one of the things we have to be aware of is that we're at the mercy and we're grateful to our neighbors across the street. If we would ever lose those 200 spaces, we're really in trouble. North Lake would be really in trouble for our Sunday morning schedule. So, and that doesn't even address like the concert schedules. We can only do a certain number of people for concerts that are daytime versus what we can do, in the evenings or weekends. So there are an assortment of things. I agree with you. Better use of space. We have talked about how fully utilized this space is. I mean, that is one of the things we discussed. Could the space be even more fully used? We already have janitorial staff that are busy setting up, taking down, accommodating different things that are going on, spaces in the back rooms and the Sunday school rooms that are being used. So it's not. This is a building that is very busy through the course of the week. And I'm not saying that we have to go add to it. I'm just saying that it is already quite busy. I don't think we're ready to say A and B. I think what we're asking is there any impetus whatsoever for this? We really believe that there's a time for discerning about property and adding to our property is not something I necessarily want to do. I didn't come here to add to the footprint of the church, frankly. I'm not somebody who wants to do that. But I think if it's a remedy that handles parking as well as helping Little Blessings to a better future, then that's why we got to where we are. That's why we arrived at where we are in terms of thinking that way. So we had another hand, yeah.
My name is Glenn Dennison, and I have a few concerns, some of them along with what was said about use of the facility that we have here, and that we don't have an option A, we don't have an option B. It seems to be like one option in the report. You take this is the solution. And I would like to see solution, option, alternative A, alternative B, alternative C for most, if not all, of the issues that are in that report before it goes to a vote by the congregation. I think there are a lot of other ideas out there for doing things that don't cost nearly as much as what this is going to cost. The gentleman over here talked about, do we know what the total cost is going to be? No, we don't know what the total cost is going to be. I think the total cost for the total build out on the idea, not just jumping into the water, but clearing the alligators out and everything else that needs to be done, needs to be priced out so when the congregation votes on this, that they know what they're getting into. When is this going to end? You know, not just jump in the water and find out what's in there later. You know, we need to know up front. And I really, we talked about changing the time of services. You mentioned, who is that, the Methodist down there? Okay. And then we have the Fairway Christian. They both have Saturday services. Late afternoon, early evening, Saturday contemporary services. If we did that here, a lot of this problem would go away, I think. Okay, I don't know what the cost would be to work with the praise band, whether we need a different praise band. Something like that might have to happen. But they, pardon? Certainly cheaper. Yeah. Could be cheaper than a couple $1 million, yeah. But, you know, those churches, both of those are very successful. They have contemporary services, they have bands, and they have Saturday services. I think that needs to be an alternative in there as well. I have read the report. I've read it twice so far. I'll probably read it a couple more times. I didn't hear anything mentioned here, but I'm concerned about this money and this effort going towards Little Blessings, even though they are Little Blessings. And there's a recommendation in the report or something in there that says that they should become a separate nonprofit and go from being a nursery type of setup, childcare, to becoming a preschool, and that they would separate themselves from North Lake Presbyterian Church, no longer be managed, supervised, or it doesn't really say what that relationship is going to turn into. It also says that the homebound effort and the food pantry ought to follow the same suit and become a separate nonprofit out from under the oversight of North Lake. So that wasn't brought up. I don't know what the future relationship between the church and these three primary ministries of the church would be. It's not really spelled out in there, and I think that needs to be addressed as well so people know, well, why are we doing this down here, and which direction are they going in, and when is all this going to happen? I mean, why don't we just let them do their fundraising now and get all the money and buy the land and wherever and become a separate nonprofit? Don't know. Thank you.
Let me offer one word to the question of nonprofit, and that is the 501c3 option is a familiar pattern for a lot of churches creating, and I know of it, I've done it previously, I know of other churches that are doing it currently, where like Love Inc. really began with a lot of energy from North Lake, but it was created in a way that it was broader than just North Lake, and the support for it then became much more, community-based support, multiple churches involved. And so one of the real questions is, can these ministries flourish to the glory of God? It's not about North Lake's glory. It's about God's glory and effectiveness. What effectiveness is there? Can they be even more effective long term as a separate 501c3 in terms of attracting additional support and partners in what they're doing? We think that's worth considering. The report, and I know there's already been discussion about it with Little Blessings. Nothing about that has been discussed or assessed in terms of Operation Homebound. We felt like in big picture, the question should be asked. That's one of the things we're saying. It should be considered. And Little Blessings might have several advantages in doing that, right? Because we've given birth to them, there's a sense of, we want them to stay with us. I have 3 kids. I'd love for them to all live with us. They're actually doing much better as a result of their decisions to grow up and live where they are and flourishing where they are. And I'm not saying I'm just saying that analogically, that, to me, sometimes the best thing we can do is give birth and then give wings and let something like that go to places that we just can't help them flourish as much if we keep them under our roof. That's part of the question we're asking. We're wrestling with that. Yeah. Stuart and then, okay, back here and then up to Stuart. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm Sarah Hopple and a member of the choir. I just wanted to ask, how firm answers will we have on August the 7th? I know the 2 contingencies meant here, like the sewer and water for the property and the zoning for the property. I'm hoping that you will have a firm answer on that by August the 7th, because that seems very important to know that for sure, that that property is going to be available for church use. And then I think we are doing this pretty much with a strong focus on what we want for Little Blessings. It is a very important ministry that we have. I really appreciated the open house, and I saw what a wonderful program it is. And so I appreciate the comments that have been made about the possible growth and the future that it is there for it. And I think we'd like to have some more expansion on that, of just knowing what we anticipate for Little Blessings and how much it will offer them to do that. Plus, you've also indicated that it's not just for Little Blessings, but perhaps our youth could make better use of that space. Logos maybe could be located down there, and that could be greater in terms of our ministry to the younger age, And so I just kind of wanted to know about firm answers. I know you've said there's a feasibility, a cost feasibility, that you hope to have answers from by the end of July. And so how firm do you think you'll have some answers by then?
Do you want to respond to that, Dottie? I think it'd be helpful to have you. Oops. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I can respond. We do not anticipate the zoning and the annexation to be completed at all by August 7th. That meeting would give us permission to continue with the process. And the congregational approval is one of the major things. Then if the annexation and the rezoning did not happen, we would not have the land, but we would have the congregational approval. It takes a very long time to get those approvals, simply because their committees meet once a month, one of them, and then the next one meets twice a month, and they have to submit it one time, and so you have to sort of hit the right week for these things. So we don't anticipate that happening till at least probably October or November at the earliest. But the first step is the congregation saying, yes, go ahead with the proposal, and yes, it would go through if the zoning were changed and the annexation occurred. But those 2 things would have to happen. And of course, the appraisal will be going on now, so we'll know if the land would be purchased at the right price.
I've had a lot of experience with Catholic churches. Since my son is Catholic, my 2 of my wives were Catholic. I lived in Italy for 2 years. I've been to the... Okay, so I know a lot about... In fact, I've been to some of the masses here on Saturday that are near me. What's wrong with Saturday? How about a church service on Saturday, which they seem to use quite often, but I've seldom seen it among Protestant churches.
Although that's not a featured recommendation, it's certainly one of the things we've talked about, we would look at. And I know Director Mike has discussed that. What are some of the implications of doing that? In Cincinnati, for more than 11 years, I did 4 services on Sunday morning, 8, 9, 10, 15, and 11:30. I'm willing to do a 4th service. So I wouldn't be I wouldn't be the one who stands in the way of that. But I do think that when you launch into that, there's a lot of work and preparation that has to go into that. We worked several years to shoehorn a contemporary service into Sunday morning, and then needed to add a 4th service. And so I think I'm very open to that. Frankly, I don't think it's going to alleviate the parking immediately, because you still have issues. I don't think you can say all of your contemporary worship is going to be on Saturday. I think you've got to at least allow options for Sunday morning and Saturday. But we can definitely look into that. If we think that's a part of the solution to the glory of God, I can see that happening.
But part of that is there's an assumption sometimes that a Saturday night service will draw just as well as a Sunday service. They do not. You typically will attract about 10% of your overall population. So say if you have 1,500 people on an average weekend, you're going to draw plus or minus 150 on a Saturday, which, if that 150 is the capacity difference between you being able to survive a Sunday morning, then it's worth doing. But that's not necessarily going to make or break. You're not going to draw, I know my experience, I was at churches where we were drawing 600 or 700 in our main services between 9 and noon on Sunday, and then drawing that 150, 200 on Saturday nights. So it's one of those things that people assume, we'll have a Saturday service, we'll draw 500 or 600 people. It doesn't really work quite that way. It's more complex than that. That's why it takes a little more thought to really think it through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back here. Dick, why don't we take... Okay, all right.
I'm Jim Patrick. I like the idea, of us expanding and doing things if we're going to grow. Because you can't grow if you don't go out here and try to do something different. I would like to know